So we have a lot of comments coming in from the community on the last video I made yesterday, and I want to go over those because I think you guys have a lot of great and interesting thoughts to share. This is in relation to Elon Musk's thoughts that the number of people who are super talented engineers and super motivated in the USA is far too low. I want to go over your guys' thoughts. This is coming in from the Shiamura. They say, at the tail end of the boomers, I've known guys that had to go back to school 4 times to change their skills so they could work. They would work their way up to be better pay and then be let go while their jobs were outsourced, right? So this is something that is a common theme as you go through these. And I just want to share this stuff. Deactive says, the MAGA comments are so stupid. The Department of Education is greatly underfunded. I have engineers in my family. There are a lot of talent in America. These idiots don't understand how education is purposely being underfunded. So morons like Musk can underpay immigrants. They aren't that far ahead of American engineers. Corporations are just short-sighted, greedy savages that prioritize quarterly profits over homegrown, well-educated talent. They don't want to pay for top American talent. That's it. Let's keep going to some more. And again, I want to share the thoughts of people in the community. This is coming from Jameer. Jameer says, it's funny, these MAGA people want free training and opportunities. Pull yourselves up by your bootstraps and go get trained. These people did the work and pay the cost. Why should you get a free ride? I, on the other hand, agree you should have equal and fair opportunity. Just pointing out the hypocrisy. Nothing is equal and fair in a capitalist society. Thank you for sharing, Jameer. Also, we have Stabsfeld says, NVIDIA's CEO is an immigrant. AMD's CEO is an immigrant. Tesla's whatever he calls himself is an immigrant. What Elon says, excellent engineering talent, he means workers that will work on fear-based immigration status and FOMO. If you are a Native American, you have already won the lottery. So that's what the incentive to be a, quote, excellent engineering talent. Captain Gaslighter doesn't care about employees, full stop, especially lazy Americans. Here's more. This is from Gab Carlick. They say, Trump and MAGA hate education. They also hate immigrants. What is happening here in America? It's all upside down and backwards. And essentially, there's going to be a conflict on how we're going to treat immigration going forward because, Musk wants to hire essentially low-paid workers or low-paid workers. That's what a lot of people are expressing here. But Trump will probably cut immigration, so they're gonna have a conflict there. Here's some more from Jar Mayonnaise. Says they don't want smart people. They want people just smart enough to push the buttons and run the machines and nothing more. If they were smarter, they'd know they were getting screwed over, and any work they do is taken by a company like inventions. Just like with politics, they love the poorly educated because they aren't smart enough to know when they're getting screwed over. Foreigners are preferred because they are too scared to death of losing their visa and getting kicked out of the country. They do exactly what they're told for dirt pay because corporations is exploiting them. We have no power anymore as citizens. The corporations have fully taken every bit of our lives. Welcome to the new United States of Russian-controlled states. And I want to make it clear, too, when we talk about these issues, we're talking about tech workers and also, too, us laborers at the same time. But mostly the comments are coming regarding the tech issues. I just want to say there's different conversations going on with this, but I do want to share all of your thoughts because one of the things that I like doing YouTube and hang out with you all is I learn every day, and hopefully we learn from each other. And as I say all the time, I wish there were more real discussions about this kind of stuff, be it in our public lives, politics, etc. And that's why we're doing it right now. When I hear discussion and thoughts. This comes from MW Folsom. The whole H-1B visa issue, which is how most foreign tech workers get into the U.S., is very complex and frankly heavily abused by tech companies. Folks come in on those visas and aren't free to look for other jobs and must accept pay and conditions. If they were too valuable to give them a green card and let them move around, most companies don't want this to occur. They want tech slaves, right? So you're seeing common themes with this stuff. This is coming from Jazz. And remember that the topic is, can you find American talent or not? And this would be more in tech stuff. Jazz says, as far as DEI is concerned, I'll let you folks get in on a little secret. Corporations know only one color, and that is green. Smiley face. In my decades of experience in IT since the 80s, I discovered that the best and brightest graduates from elite universities quite often are not. While they may have passion, once in the real world, they find out that their skills from college don't count for much beyond getting that first job. You can work them to death, but you aren't going to get much in the way of innovation or critical thinking out of some of them unless they have done a lot of self-study and self-learning. Most quickly adapt, but they are not the ones who fear so-called DEI. And the fear of us at heart of it. When someone like me, a black man who is almost entirely self-taught, gets hired and proceeds to outperform them, they see it as a threat. Worse, they know that I am not special. That said, you have to find the right company. And trust me, Tesla is not it. A chaotic management, a scam driven culture dedicated to making one guy, quote, rich on paper is not going to help you grow and most likely waste your time in the long run. And it's interesting because Elon Musk, in his point of view, he thinks there's unlimited wealth potential in the USA, and it's obviously a different point of view than say workers. And Musk says the fixed pie fallacy is at the heart of much wrong-headed economic thinking. There is essentially infinite potential for job and company creation. Think of all the things that didn't exist 20 or 30 years ago. So we have a discrepancy on how people think about the world. And, my point of view on this stuff is, I'll just say this, your background and opportunities, meaning like how much your parents gave you to start your own company, certainly, how can I say, affects your point of view on this stuff. So if you don't know, Musk got a bunch of money from his parents, essentially, to start his company, and also to we'll never get the full story of how much he got, say, for help with schooling or plane tickets, these kind of things, or apartments, like essentially. But he had a lot of family backing. I'll just say that. I don't know exactly how much. I've heard different numbers around there, but I'll just say he certainly had family backing, and that matters in terms of your view of what opportunity is. Because a common thing I've been noticing with a lot of this discussion from you guys is just that in the USA, it costs a lot to get education. And when you compare to, say, workers in other countries where education could be free, it's very real. In place in Europe, like, education is free. I also, say, live here in Korea. I can tell you the top school, which would be Seoul National, very, very inexpensive in comparison to, say, the U.S. counterparts. Unfortunately, it makes education very difficult for people to get. Although, to be fair, these days, as one person to comment already, you can be self-taught. But it's still tough because depending on which positions you're looking at, etc. You still need to have some sort of way to certify that you're able to do said things, or some sort of inroad into the company, which I've told you before, guys. In this day and age, personal connections, it's not who you know kind of thing. The who you know stuff still does matter. But again, we're all talking about different jobs in different industries. So for example, this is Mad Chefred. They say companies want to hire sponsored immigrants because sponsored immigrants are trapped. They can't quit without risking deportation. So they will tolerate worse conditions, pay, and less likely to complain about illegal conditions. So again, these are a lot of the same comments that we're seeing. Here's another one. Soros says, and they have a different point of view. I work in IT for the last 10 years. If someone in this domain can't, I think they mean can't here. If someone in this domain can't find a job, it's because he did do something wrong. IT company always search for good talent. This is coming in from Joe. Joe says, keep the native U.S. Ignorant, which is unspoken policy which allow large corporations to bring in skilled, cheap labor, doing the same in my country, the UK. Also this from Alir. Alir says, importing talent makes companies like Tesla and other government contract acquiring companies more money. All they have to say is, we can't find talent in the US. A master's degree engineer with experience did not get job at Boeing. No openings, but I saw many contracts where they charge higher prices due to having higher overseas. They work for less, but the government got charged more for them. And I thought that was a really interesting comment on sort of the business practices of some of these tech companies, right? So you hire overseas, and then you can maybe pretend that you're paying more than you actually are, and then improve your margins that way. I thought that was an interesting comment. Here's Michelle. Michelle says, I don't know why people think construction is a lowly job. That used to be a desired, well-paid job. You had apprentice, become a journeyman, a master carpenter, and then they started hiring lower wage workers, and no one can afford to do construction anymore. The wages drop a lot. I mentioned several times on the channel, guys, I grew up around a lot of construction workers, farm workers when I grew up in Oregon. And back then, this would be back in the 80s, we just started having these essentially non-union workers coming in. A lot of them at that time were illegal immigrants. It wasn't as big of a hotbed issue back in the 80s. And I won't say it wasn't an issue, but not to the level extreme that it is today. And I think, I don't know the exact year, but I'll just say that I remember hearing about when I was a kid, it just started popping up. And at that time, construction workers actually got paid fairly well if you're unionized. Today, I can't comment on that. I'll just say the industry has definitely changed. I think certainly there are way more illegal workers working in those type of jobs. And those jobs can be dangerous, right? And if you get hurt in the job and say you're unionized, you're going to be much more protected than not. But I will say though, in terms of my experience in the 80s, and this is I can't speak to today, it's very different, is, well, there's a combination of a couple things. So one was the older workers back then in the 80s would take more pride than the younger workers, right? So that was in the 80s. Okay, so today, if that trend is continued, and I'm talking about American workers here, I wonder if it's still possible to find workers. I'm talking about American workers that want to work in construction, and maybe not. Back then, I just remember hearing hearing that it was hard to find good workers. I just remember that. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that at that time, that's about the 80s, that the illegal immigrants were necessarily better workers, but I know they were cheaper. But I heard that the training of them was very, very different, right? So the Michelle is the world that she's talking about, and I remember this world of where you would essentially be trained with someone, a mentor for a long period of time, and then get skilled like a skilled laborer, which is something that was, again, it used to be a really, really good job. I think today there's a shortage of kids who want to work with their hands. Like I personally think auto mechanic is a pretty good job. Actually, at least it was a good job, for a while. I don't know what the pay is these days. I mean, everything changes, of course. But we're always still going to need carpenters, plumbers, electricians, and sheet wall. What's it called? They call them. What do we call them? I said sheet wall. YouTube's probably think I'm swearing there, so I won't go on to that. But yeah, construction workers is an interesting one, and I wish we'd talk more about that, because I think there's more than just tech jobs in USA. But I think a lot of people, the tech jobs obviously pay a lot more compared to construction worker. But there's nothing wrong with construction work. There's Robert Pearson says here, when I went to my master's degree, I was a token American. All the grad students were from China or India. When I went for my PhD, I was one of 20 Americans. When I applied at Cadence, I did not get the job because they already picked a foreign engineer. That's from Robert's point of view. And this is from N. Reed. They say here, the amount of time it takes to find a good job today has gone up significantly due to layoffs and slowdown in hiring. Seats filled by those on visas, H-1B, and reduce the number of available openings. D. Hood says, when managing a large student employee program, I had to vet the American students because most of them didn't want to think about their job, how to get it done. Most wanted explicit instructions and extensive personal attention. Foreign-born would hit the ground running. So yes, cheaper from a productivity point of view, with few American exceptions, mostly with those with poor parents. So again, I'm just telling you guys different points of view on this stuff. This is from Claude. Claude says, it's cheaper to have Indians raise and educate children, talking about from India, not Native American, but from India, then choose the best and brightest and import them to the U.S. instead of raising and educating all American children properly. This is from Angry Man. I hope you're not angry, but it is your name. It says, honestly, ignorance and racism aside, this is entirely the wealthy's fault. They built a system that rewards pulling every penny out, extracting wealth, all that is possible, at the expense of everything else. From No Child Left Behind, so that would be during Bush, right? Yeah, thanks Bush 2.0, destroying public schools, to abuse of the H-1B visas. This has been going on for decades. You see the C-suite lamenting why there's no working loyalty while giving themselves raises and bonuses, in the same breath laying off 25% of the workforce, increasing workloads, and not increasing wages. This talent gap that Elon and his contemporaries are lamenting is their own fault. Many talented engineers have left those fields because of lack of certainty. Add to that ever increasing requirements to getting a job or job application methods these days. Why would anyone bother? And again, a lot of stuff that people have to share on this. Here's another one. This is from Schroeder. They say here, I've been in tech for almost 4 decades, so naturally, I've watched this issue closely during my career. U.S. corporations use H-1B visas for foreign tech workers not to replace U.S. workers or, quote, take their jobs, but to keep salary levels depressed. They saw salaries getting too high, so they ran to the government crying, quote, tech worker shortage, tech worker shortage. It was a lie. There was only a shortage of workers who were willing to work for a modest salary. There was no shortage for companies willing to pay generous wages. But the government always does what companies want, not what benefits workers. So they created the H-1B visa program, which brought tens of thousands of tech workers into the U.S. willing to work for lower salaries. Had they not done this, Americans like me would probably have about $1 million, $1 million more in our bank accounts right now. But no, no one, quote, took my job. What's ironic is that the live tech worker shortage became a self-fulfilling prophecy. College students are not dumb, and when comp sci majors saw that the tech salaries were no longer as high as they once were due to H-1Bs, as I stated, many of them switched to other majors. So in the end, there was really a slight shortage of U.S. tech workers, just as U.S. corporations had falsely claimed prematurely. The Schroeder also goes on to say, it's an interesting comment, if politicians really believe in the free market, as they always claim they do, they would allow tech salaries to temporarily climb up to high levels. Then thousands of college kids would have switched over to comp majors, and the shortage would have worked itself out naturally, with greater competition for jobs bringing salaries down to reasonable levels. But unfortunately, politicians only allow for the market to operate freely when it puts money in their pockets or money in the pockets of their donors. So you're getting a lot of complicated issues, but basically, essentially, if there's a shortage of workers, you would pay more, right? And then say more people go study that field, and then because now they have a whole bunch of workers who are, say, competent in that field, then salaries would come down because there's more supply. So that's sort of what he's referring to. But then he's talking about then tech workers then would, or tech companies then could sort of change the market dynamics by bringing in workers that were not part of that initial supply. This is from Anna. Anna says, this is the real story of what happened in Silicon Valley. When they started bringing in H-1B engineers from India, Indian company brought their brightest engineers from IIT, top university, right? So that's the India Institute of Technology, I believe that's what the name of that one is, to be interviewed by human resource departments in one of the biggest tech companies and made a very good impression with HR. One of the HR managers said the Indian engineers were very smart, smarter than U.S. engineers, and that the start of massive number of H-1B engineers entering the U.S. and massive layoff of U.S. engineers repeatedly to get cheaper labor. This was planned by the venture capitalists and CEOs of tech companies. I know this sounds racist, but that's what happened. Sage says, Chris, you're absolutely right. As a naturalized citizen, I am too shocked what a taboo class is. The rest of the world is keenly aware of class differences, and it's fundamental to lots of its culture. Here in the USA, race and color is central while the rich skate. And that's a comment I make. I didn't think about class as much until I went to university, and then I thought about it way more when I left the country because it becomes more obvious. The discussions are really different. It's something that they don't discuss enough about in the USA is the class differences. Not everything's race all of the time. Here's some more, and it's great to hear your guys' comments. This is from Kevin. Kevin says, why are there so many immigrant engineers? Is because they don't put themselves in debt to become an engineer like we do. Like we have to in the USA, in the United States. Why don't we take some of the money from the military budget, put it in education, build up our education up, would make our country stronger, put these military industrial companies that don't want money taken out of their pockets, so they spend millions and millions of dollars lobbying against something like that. So Kevin's advocating for investing in education, which I'm all for. And then we also have Truth Loan. They say here, yeah, my ex had a computer engineering degree, but could not get a job in his field because they advertised for unicorns, okay? With all the latest knowledge-specific degrees, certifications, and 5 years of experience in brand new technologies. State Farm didn't employ any Americans at that time because they could recruit from abroad. People who had almost zero training or knowledge, but very creative fictional degrees and a willingness to work at low salaries. They brought whole families with them who obtained a residency work permits under false pretenses. Big corporations have done more to undermine ambitious college students and are a high-tech labor market than anyone walking thousands of miles to work menial labor in the USA. Those foreign recruits are only allowed to work for the company that imported them for as long as they remain non-citizens. So they are stuck unless they become naturalized citizens in record time, which isn't as easy as people think it is. It's not uncommon for those who don't measure up to be fired and not be deported because their spouse had acquired a work visa for another company and family remains here without ever taking steps to become citizens. In essence, Musk and other fat cats don't want to pay reasonable wages to Americans at all. It isn't a shortage of intelligence or skills, it is a deliberate devaluation of people who already have them in favor of training trainable foreigners who aren't aware that they're being used in nefarious ways. This is also another one, Colonel Clink. And again, I like reading through your comments. You guys can hear each other, and you start to notice, themes in this stuff when you go through these things. Colonel says 2 points on the hardest jobs. Asked if Americans would do it, and I talked about construction and agriculture in the last video. This person says 1, the illegal immigrants who do those jobs are actually highly skilled. Point 2. The point of hiring illegal immigrants is to get labor without any workplace protections and to get as close to operating the business with slave labor as possible. The reason why citizens tend not to do the work is that they demand more pay and not to be mistreated, right? Bonus, due to demographic changes in Mexico, the seasonal Mexican labor supply is going to dry up and we will consider a gasp not exploiting farm labor anymore. So we're talking about, again, different issues on here on this topic, but and again, guys, I like going through this stuff because we don't have enough just honest conversations about this stuff in a sincere way. So that's my point of view on all this stuff. I'm fine talking about any topic, and I just want to hear your points of view on these things. This is from MX Ass. They says there's enough STEM talent in the USA. It's about do you want to be a slave to a company or not? Musk wants slaves. I believe most people work to live, not live to work. Also, anyone ever wonder why California is so tech heavy? It has all to do with back in the day, university education was free there. Ronald Reagan destroyed that. And the education, talking about the university system, I think is probably referring to the University of California system has been historically the strongest public education university system in the country. And I didn't realize it until I grew up in Oregon, and I'll just say our schools in Oregon aren't as good as California, or say the great state, like say Michigan is a great state school, University of Michigan, or University of North Carolina, University of Virginia, University of Washington's a good school. I'm trying to think of other great state schools. UT Austin's a pretty good one. Some states are just better state schools than others. And so, like, when using the example Cal, like you can go to Berkeley, you can go to UCLA, UC San Diego, right? Different ones. The point though I'm trying to make is, in my opinion, I think we should all invest in state education, but not every state prioritizes that, right? And this is sort of this person's talking about in terms of you get more talent coming from California, everyone moves out there, et cetera, based on where the talent is, and you build from there. But costs have actually steadily been going up in places like, say, the University of California. So it makes it difficult for families to afford it, which is different than other countries. Again, I mentioned before where they keep costs low. But I'm pro education. I have different points of view than some people. It's a lot longer discussion, of course. Here's Mr. Gorg Gefla. They say here, the companies have failed. India prioritized training for engineering, and the U.S. basically prioritized outsourcing for corporations. Motivate is code for we want to pay you peanuts and work you to death so we can be billionaires. That's from Musk's point of view of saying that. Chris, you said it recently. They love Chinese workers because they work 60 hours a week, no complaints. And they try that in USA, people revolt. A report just came out about BYD slave labor practices globally, and that is not the labor environment we want for workers or employers, right? This is coming in from Andy. Andy says, I've worked as a union construction for laborer for 34 years. I worked many non-union construction jobs before that. From my personal experience, immigrant labor has kept wages down. I've personally had undocumented immigrants work for me, and they are no more skilled. They will readily break the law and do unsafe work because they don't know any better. Communication difficulties can be a big hurdle too. Roofing wages, concrete, many other low-skilled crafts have had stagnant wages for 30 years in some instances. This is why American youth find many of those jobs unattractive. The nursing home industry is the same thing. I found as many as a rule, second-generation immigrants tend to be conservative, and despite the fact liberals seem to be pro-immigration, though I'm not, Hispanic immigrants are often very conservative, especially when it comes to traditional family structure. The man is the boss, the woman is the slave, and religious idealism. My summation always comes down to accept for third world labor. America is a shareholder paradise. Politicians on both sides of the aisle are bought and paid for. It's another comment coming in from April. April says, another thing that people talk about technology jobs omit from the discussion is the bell curve. 68% of the U.S. population are C students. Below that, 14% are D and 2% are F. That means that altogether, 84% of the population will never have the academic achievement to highest performing technology employee that people like Musk wants. I'm not even sure he would be excited about hiring 14% B students, which leaves 2% of the U.S. population that Musk is interested in hiring. A good education can help, but not enough for Musk, I'm guessing. Greyhand says, here's why I'm fighting against education. Here's why they are fighting against education. If there's competition for jobs, they will have to pay for more for talent. If jobs are hard to come by people will accept less money. If there's a shortage, they need foreign labor, and then why are they cutting wages? Traditionally, there's a labor shortage, wages go up. Lately, the opposite happens, and when there's a labor business insists they cut their wages, their solution to every problem is to cut wages. Here's a thought: cut corporate tax deductions. So I appreciate that thought, Greyhand. We also have a comment coming here from Al's V. Al V says, Elon loves H-1B workers because he knows they will put up with anything he forces upon them. Since their status depends on his job, working in tech in San Francisco, I've seen these folks tolerate toxic grind set far better than most US-born people will today because their lives and livelihoods depend on it. We also have this. This is from Gallus. Gallus says, from someone who's worked in the private engineering sector, speaking for, quote, big tech and Silicon Valley, if you're not white or East Asian backed by Chinese dark money, you're not even being considered for a job. Just ask the thousands of qualified Black and Hispanic new grads who've applied for these jobs over the years and have gotten rejected 98% of the time. The U.S. could easily fix this by literally equalizing the playing field by prioritizing their own citizens, no matter their race, color, religion, which companies like Google and Microsoft still discriminate based on. Indians, Pakistanis fit the equation because they are cheap labor and they base their whole economy around jobs like IT, engineering, and medical. That's coming in from Gallus. We also have Defak. We also have Da Fu. Says here, there is no shortage of engineers. They're all getting laid off and still looking for work, so out of touch with reality. Mary says, I worked full-time while going to school full-time, earning my MBA. I had the advantage of living in a state with excellent network of universities. And CM Ralph says, I worked in Silicon Valley medical manufacturing for over 35 years as a senior precision mechanical inspector. I retired in 2017 and still have not been able to find a qualified replacement. There is a woeful shortage of skilled manual labor because we stopped instructing kids how to work with their hands. We stuck all kids behind computers at school. No one is being taught mechanics, wood shop, and other tasks that are not computer-based. Folks blaming either side of the political spectrum have fallen for the grift of the 1% in order to replace blame. We need to start looking at the 1%, not at each other. And we also have this. Dragonfly Heart says, there's a STEM expert shortage like there's a teacher shortage. There isn't one. I am both. There are thousands of us who can't or won't work under the inhumane conditions expected. I went to science education to try to understand and address this issue, only to learn that it would be almost impossible to be allowed to teach science in underserved schools where I student taught. I learned that our education system is intentionally failing. Wonder who has been invested in underfunding schools while expecting more from them. Real mystery. And essentially, this is just how it is. We don't pay teachers that much in the USA, and it's actually a real problem. And it becomes even a bigger problem when schools that need good teachers the most, like we pay them the least, like just how schools are funded, right? And so it makes it hard for people to take the jobs. Like they just don't pay enough to take it. And for example, let's say you just for example, let's say you want to teach in New York City, just for example. And if you guys see the cost of living in New York City, don't talk just a teacher job, it's just no way you can do it. So like the you get this major imbalances, right? Of like who can afford to live there, who can afford to teach there. So you could certainly come up with ways to say pay teachers more. Or you could come up with another way over like say, could you imagine just imagine if schools that like subsidize housing for teachers to sort of help offset the cost. But either way, I do believe more money in education. That's something that I always talk about. I think it's important. It matters. It matters a lot. And then this is Greyhound again says, and they're talking about Hollywood here, and I think it's an interesting one, and I related this one, and I'll share some thoughts in a moment here. It says Musk and lying, or I think it is lying, and lying is like a fish breathing water. The short. And here's another comment from Greyhound, and I actually really identify this one because I worked in Hollywood also. This one says here, Musk and lying is like fish breathing water. The shortage is of cheap labor. He wants to import cheap foreign engineers and programmers, then send them home when they are done. If anything, the visa system will get expanded under Musk's presidency. I work in the film industry and have lost jobs to foreign labor from Canada, England, and Australia. I never once lost a job to a Mexican. Exporting jobs killed the film industry, just like manufacturing jobs. Easily 90% of films are shot out of country. Canada has been the new Hollywood for 25 years now. It's called the X-Files effect. If you guys don't know, the X-Files was filmed in Vancouver, and I remember hearing about that, and I think that might have been the first major show, and that's interesting about X-Files because I remember exactly hearing about, oh, that's Canada, and I think maybe it was all over the news at the time, but yes, X-Files was one of the big ones. It says, when X-Files moved to LA, Canada responded with massive tax yeah, and would even times fully fund films if they'd shoot in Canada. It killed Hollywood. So this is a tough issue to address because essentially we're talking about many American cities are struggling because the jobs have left. It's not mentioned here, but automation is one reason. And another reason would be jobs would go overseas because essentially the big companies are looking for cheaper labor in order to keep Wall Street counterparts happy. Essentially, a CEO they're beholden to shareholders and always concentrating on the profit margins, etc. And that's honestly that's what we watch a lot on this channel is like, hey, what are companies doing, etc. But there are problems when that's your ultimate goal is always chasing the bottom dollar, the lowest wages, at all costs. And unfortunately, it hurts a lot of workers in the USA. And I think we're going to unfortunately see a continuing of this trend and a bigger divide between the rich and the poor. I'll just be further frank. My opinion, and I've said several times on the channel, I think one way is to support Americans, and this would be all Americans, is just affordable education, affordable healthcare. I think those two things would be massive improvements to the American infrastructure. But sort of where our trend is going now, with the last election, is a lot of people essentially want, I guess, privatization, or they're, how can I say, fooled to think that they want privatization, because I think that will further make the problem worse, essentially. Why? Because when you introduce everything for profits, it's just like you're expanding on the problem that got us there in the first place. Like just everything is always about the dollars all of the time. You in today's society, you have to do more than just your job itself. You also have to invest. And this is something that we talk about on the channel. That's why we track the economy and stuff like that. Because just your salary alone doesn't cut it anymore. But I also don't want to acknowledge it makes it really hard too when, well, Chris, what are you talking about? I can't even invest because I don't have a job in the first place. And it's a hard to answer. The only thing I can really say is you always have to be retraining. That's just a part of it. Like never stop learning, right? Never stop learning. The other thing you have to do too is always be maintaining your relationships. There's always going to be a job for you in the USA. Let's be honest. There's always going to be a job, in my opinion, or not just opinion, but just it is what it is. There's always going to be a job, but it may not necessarily be what you think it was going to be when you first started, right? So I don't disagree with say Hollywood is dying, and I don't disagree in dying in terms of like localized jobs, be it like VFX jobs or just production jobs in general, post production, right? These kind of things. It just some of the jobs have moved, right? And so you have to think about, okay, what can I do as an alternative? And I know it's hard, guys. I really know. We worked in LA, and then COVID really hurt the industry a lot. Everything shut down. And I have a lot of friends that are still in LA. I have a lot of friends that left also. Just the industry is not what it was in terms of opportunities anymore. And we've also seen a global slowdown in just not just in Hollywood and film, but in entirety. Regarding the tech comments that we talked about, it was really interesting to hear everyone's thoughts on these kind of things. There was a common theme, definitely, as you guys can see, where people feel like the H-1B visa is to serve people like Musk, to where they have basically indentured servants, however you want to say it, like people who can't leave their jobs and are forced to take poor conditions. I think that's a real thing, because we know that happened with Twitter when Musk took it over and demanded everyone to go into quote demon mode. Like basically all the Americans quit, and then there's only people who were only visa holders stayed. Basically, it was something like they fire like 75% of the people. And one of the things from the CEO perspective, they just kind of want you to devote your life to company and work 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. You can call, email anytime, and it's not a great way to live, right? And it's all based on CEOs getting rich, etc. I think this trend is not a healthy trend and not sustainable, in my opinion, and sort of why I'm bringing it up, and just wanted to sort of get you guys a voice in this and have these discussions. I wish more people would talk about this kind of stuff. Like the world shouldn't always be like chase for profits at all costs. Sustainability does matter, especially when you're building a healthy society and a supportive society. That's why I mentioned before, in my opinion, one of the ways to address all these things is just education and healthcare to make that affordable, because as costs go up on stuff, and you guys are gonna see it, there's gonna be, I think, even more issues with I'll use the example of healthcare going up. And then, I understand, because people say, well, just go get retrained or go get, more education, get a better job. But like that costs money too, right? So you're dealing with costs on multiple fronts. And then, I'm talking in terms of inflation, you see food prices going up, et cetera. And I know, depending on your political affiliation, you all want to blame it on one particular president or one particular party. It's not just one. It's been trending this way for a long time, and very few people actually talk about it like in honest ways. And so that's one thing that I've learned in my life, and I just encourage you guys to do the same, is learn from other people's experience, because it may not necessarily be the same as yours. And this is like how you become of how the world functions. So we'll keep having these discussions, and I'll make another video about another topic. But I'm just saying, I do read through all your guys' comments, and I do appreciate it, because I learn from you every day, and hopefully we learn from each other. So thanks again for watching, and catch you on the next video.